The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. It's a Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. It's Elijah Herbel alongside Connor Clark here as we're spending another day filling in for Chris Schmidt, who's off to South Dakota land watching his son play some baseball. So we're filling in for today. And do we have a good show planned for you today or what? As coming up here in about 20 minutes, we're going to have Hail Varsity managing editor Brandon Vogel joining us before he takes 2 weeks off. I believe we're his last order of business before he takes a 2-week-long vacation. So we'll chat with Brandon, and we appreciate his time here on a Thursday afternoon. That's coming your way at 4:25. And then coming your way next hour, we have some special guests planned, as well as leading off hour 2, we'll have 8-time College World Series umpire Jeff Henrichs joining us here. He's a Lincoln East grad. He's from the state of Nebraska, and he has worked more College World Series than any other umpire in college baseball history. He's going to be joining us at 5:05. And then 5:25, you hear him on Coffee and Cream. We're going to get his thoughts on the College World Series, as well as what's coming up from Hurrdat next week up in Omaha. Andrew Rogers joins us at 5:25. And then to cap things off, we'll have Danny Burke joining us, another edition of Burke's Best Bets as the Pride of Chicago checks in. He's going to take a look at the weekend of MLB games, as well as the College World Series and what else he likes this weekend. And that's going to be our show today. So it should be a good show planned. Connor, I think you're joining us here for hour 1, and then you're leaving me all by my lonesome for hour 2.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. If I have time, I can try and stick around for you, but I'm coming to you from the Haymarket Park press box right now, and we're getting ready for Game 3 against the Lake Country Dockhound. So I guess am on site for today, but I know Elijah was going to do the show all by his lonesome today, so I felt bad, and I wanted to help fill in. So ready to rock here. Lots to talk about, as you said earlier. Some breaking news today in Huskerland as well, which I'm sure we will get to at some point during the show. But it's a beautiful day here in Star City. It's actually really hot, a little too hot for a Chicagoan like me. But nonetheless, just a great day to be talking sports yet again.
That it is, as we got plenty to get into. Connor, as you kind of laid out, Jordy Bahl, something that we want to talk about. I'm going to preface this just for you, Connor, because I know I didn't preface this with you before the show, and I think it's going to be a fun topic for us to hit a little bit later this hour. I saw it on Twitter, so get your wheels turning. Which college football mascot would you most like to eat, and how would you prepare that mascot?
Oh.
And I'm not talking the literal person in the costume. I'm talking whatever the animal is or whatever it is. I think we're going to get into that here a little bit later at 4:40. And then also another topic for today, which we're going to hit with Brandon Vogel. Build your own Husker football coach if you're taking some of the traits of previous Husker football head coaches. Who are you going to be putting together, like the recruiting prowess, the on-field coaching, the in-game adjustments, all those sorts of things? I think I want to get Brandon's take on what the ideal Husker football coach would be. So we're going to get into all that here a little bit later this hour, as well as my thoughts after spending a lot of yesterday talking about how the college football world seems to be moving more towards an NFL model. I want to kind of jump in on is it the NFL model they're moving to, or is it European football? So these are all thoughts that we'll get to, but let's start it off with Jordy Bahl. This was the news of the day in Husker Nation, and we've kind of seen it coming. We talked about it a little bit on Monday after it was announced that Jordy was entering her name into the transfer portal. But today she makes it official. Some pictures posted up on her Twitter, as well as from Husker Softball, a statement from Jordy Bahl. I am excited to return home and be Jordy Bahl, the softball player, but more importantly, the person. I am excited thinking about growing the game that has provided me so many opportunities for growth in my home state, a currently overlooked state for girls in softball of all ages, and I am excited to finish up my softball journey right here where it began. That is Jordy Bahl, her statement on coming back to the University of Nebraska to play some softball. As for the Husker softball team, they released a statement from head coach Rhonda Revelle, which we'll get here in just a second. I had it pulled up, and I seem to have lost it. So let's get this pulled up for you one more time. Maybe. Kind of while I look for that, your initial reaction to Jordy Bahl. Schmitty and I talked about this on Monday. I don't think it can be understated what this means for Husker softball. I'm not going to say that Nebraska is now your favorite to go win the Women's College World Series next year, but I think those kind of aspirations should be what this Husker softball team is looking for now, because in the circle, she's not going to be starting every single game most likely, and I think they're probably going to find a role for her bat and what she can do on offense as well. But having somebody that you can turn to in the pitching circle whenever you need outs, and I'm not just talking 3 like we're talking Husker baseball this year. I'm talking she can go get you 5 innings of no-run baseball, only giving up a hit or 2. That's what she has shown at Oklahoma. She obviously had one of the best teams in the country behind her, but she's one of the best pitchers in softball, not just in college softball, but in the sport as a whole right now. And the pickup that this is for Husker softball is absolutely massive, and I expect to see those season ticket numbers trending upwards here over the next couple months. Yeah,
this is definitely, I would venture to say, a program-changing pickup, right? Because you add not only a really good softball player who's from the state, but the best, arguably, softball player in the country, and you add her to this roster that has already had a lot of success in the past couple of years. So this is a team that's made the tournament the last 2 years, have been eliminated in the regional, but how does Nebraska take that next step? Well, you go and get one of your own, and this is a massive addition for Rhonda Revelle and her staff. I think Bowlin Stadium is going to be heavily, heavily attended next spring. I'm very excited to see how that looks. I know it was heavily attended the past couple of years, but now that you add a name like Jordy, things are so much different now, and you can already feel the impact that Jordy Bahl has on the state. I mean, June 30th at the Omaha Storm Chasers is already Jordy Bahl Day. So, I mean, it's quick, and she is here, and it is amazing how quickly the Jordy Bahl effect has, come into the state. Just some numbers on her this year, and we talked about it with Jeff and Carol on the morning show earlier today. But a 22-1 record in 2023, an ERA of .90, a WHIP of .80. She started 22 games, made 38 appearances in total, pitched 12 complete games, had 8 shutouts in those 12 complete games, pitched 147 and 1/3 innings, gave up 20 runs, 19 of those earned, walked 37, and, oh, by the way, struck out 192 batters. This is a generational softball pitcher in Jordy Bahl, and this is a program-changing get for Rhonda Revelle. It's going to be a very, very exciting softball season for Husker Nation next year.
And you don't hear all that much about the transfer portal in college softball. Like, whenever you think of transfer portal, you think primarily football, basketball. There's a little bit of baseball there, but even then, baseball kind of feels back burner with the transfer portal just because of if you're at a JUCO, you can go to the MLB draft after a year or two, or 3 years in college baseball, you can go off to the MLB draft. Like, the need to go and enter your name in the transfer portal in baseball feels less, and even less so in softball. But I wonder about what we talked about, the peer recruiting, almost the Dylan Raiola effect we were talking about with Husker football a couple of months ago, with getting this type of player. What kind of talent can it attract to Nebraska? Not only in the portal, I should extend this to recruiting as well, because Jordy's going to be a softball player for Nebraska next year. The recruiting class is pretty much done for next year, but the next class, the people who are going to be seniors next season, they can still get themselves a year under Jordy Bahl. What type of pitcher can you bring in to say, hey, we're going to give you 1 year of tutelage under Jordy Bahl, come play for Nebraska, we have our sights set high. You can do that in recruiting. You can do that in the transfer portal. The impact of what this can do for the talent of the softball team at Nebraska is huge. And, get your futures tickets. Go up to Council Bluffs. Husker softball to win the Big Ten in 2023/2024 it's going to be. I don't know what your odds look like there, but I think it's a pretty solid bet. Nebraska to make the Women's College World Series field. Well, maybe these are things we talk about with Danny Burke as a part of Burke's Best Bets next hour, but the ceiling for this Husker softball team seems to be the sky right now with what you can do with this roster, with who is, I guess, arguably, but it's becoming less and less arguably by the day, the best softball player in the country. The statement from Rhonda Revelle: the entire Nebraska softball team is thrilled to have Jordy join the Red Team. Jordy is an amazing young woman, teammate, and athlete who we know is an incredible addition to our team both on and off the field. Having known Jordy for several years, we have not been surprised by her accomplishments, as she has always been the epitome of a driven, determined, and laser-focused competitor. Jordy is a winner on the inside and out, and she uplifts and inspires all those who are around her. This is a wonderful day for Husker Nation to welcome back our homegrown Husker, Jordy Bahl. As for Jordy, she posted the picture pointing to a outline of the state of Nebraska she has tattooed on her arm. She's had that tattooed for a couple of years now. She posts the picture in a Husker softball jersey, the pinstripes, pointing to that tattoo, and it got me thinking, man, why doesn't every edition in the transfer portal get the home or the state of wherever they're going tattooed on them for the announcement? Like if Casey Thompson last year or this year would have gotten the state of Florida tattooed on his arm and have been pointing to that in the announcement, like that would have been pretty badass, in my humble opinion. Like,
well,
what way
would the
to
state
announce
of Florida be sandwiched in between the state of Texas and the state of Nebraska in that picture?
That's the problem with the transfer portal era, I guess, is when you make multiple stops and now you got to move to your other arm. You're moving down to the leg, get all the different outlines. But
hey, tattoo removal is expensive, okay? So you just got to be careful with that.
I thought that was a pretty cool way to announce that, and that's the obviously the big news of the day. Jordy Bahl is a Husker. We'll get Brandon Vogel's take on that here in just a few minutes, as well as some thoughts on Husker football and what we're about to get into here, Connor. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go to this build your greatest Husker coach of all time, but I think a more interesting topic to go into here on hour one is, what does the future of college football look like? And this kind of comes on the back of what I was talking about yesterday. College football is moving more towards an NFL-type model where you go in playoffs at the end of the year. The regular season seems to be mattering less and less. You want a lot of parity. Not like any given Sunday in the NFL. I think the leaders or the powers that be in college football want it to be any given Saturday in college football. Just because Ohio State's going up against a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team, they want that parity. They want Ohio State to feel tested in that game. That kind of seems like what the Big Ten is going for with this new scheduling model. But I read an interesting article in The Athletic this morning about, is the future of college football more akin to what we see in European soccer than it is in the NFL? And what's really interesting about European soccer is it does kind of seem to have a fitting connection with college football, where you have the blue bloods of the English Premier League. They have all the money. They're going to be in the Premier League every single year. They're taking teams similar to what you see in the transfer portal. They're taking teams in the lower levels. You know what? They're finding their best players. They're going to fund that program for a while by saying, you know what? We're going to take your player, but we're going to give you $25 million for the rights to have this player. And we're going to get the right to that player. But now you're going to have $25 million that you can use not only to pay your players, also pay your coach, pay your backroom staff, really handle your budget for the year. That's the English soccer model. And then at the end of the year, it's about promotion and relegation. The three worst teams in the Premier League get demoted down to the championship, and the two best teams in the championship get promoted up to the Premier League, and then there's a playoff for that third team to get promoted to the Premier League every single year, and that's huge for the Premier, or to make the Premier League, because of the extra $150 million you'll make from TV rights in that upper conference. And I'm not saying that promotion and relegation is what's coming to college football in the near future, but it is an interesting idea to look at with the portal, saying, you know what, your lower level teams, these teams that are in the Mountain West, in the MAC, their goal is to put together a good football team, find some guys that have either been overlooked or maybe they've transferred out of a big-time program. We're going to put them together. We're going to get a great team. We're going to try to go win the MAC. And you know what? The MAC's in partnership with the Big Ten, so the team that finishes last in the Big Ten gets sent down to the MAC. The team that's best in the MAC gets sent up to the Big Ten, and then after you get your year getting sent up to the Big Ten, the players that have gone and done really successful things for your program can either go transfer up to your national title college football playoff type contenders, they can go off to the NFL, or they can stick around and you can try to parlay it into multiple years of success, and you get that TV media rights payout from the Big Ten. It gives you a reason to not suck, which I think is important in American sports, as you see tanking all over the place, and less so in college football, but it gives you a reason to say, you know what, we can't have sustained years of failure in college football. It'd be important for the Big Ten in that sense to have your teams at the bottom. So right now you look at the Indianas and Northwesterns and Rutgers of the world. I'll even throw Nebraska in there. There's a reason for you to say, you know what, we need to cut our losses now. We can't deal with another rebuilding season because another one of these and we might end up in the MAC. It's an interesting concept to ponder. I don't know if it ever comes about in college football, but whenever you look at that English European model, I think there's a lot more parallels to what we see in college football today than what you see in the NFL, and I know I'm kind of disagreeing with what I said in my own points yesterday about the college football moving closer to the NFL, but I wanted to dive in and do some more research, and I really think comparing what European soccer has to college football in America could be interesting to see college football take some bits and pieces from the European model and use it in their own system.
Look, I understand the comparison there, but it's not like teams right now are trying to be bad, right? Because there's no incentive in college football to be bad, right? Except for maybe getting a new coach, right? Or, that's about it, right? I mean, you don't want to be, it's not like Northwestern, Indiana, Rutgers, Nebraska, whoever. It's not like they're trying to lose, right? And I'm not saying that that's what you're saying, Elijah, that they're trying to lose. Obviously they're not, but there's no incentive to lose anyway. And I think the comparison I would make to European soccer would be in the Premier League, right? When you have the top two teams at the end of the year with the most points or whatever, however it works. I'm not a huge soccer guy, but you could look at that in the Big Ten now, next year with no divisions and everybody's in the same pool. I think that's going to be more similar to it, because then you really truly do take the top two teams out of the field of 16 that you're going to have, and that makes things interesting, and every single game matters as much as the last, so no matter who you're playing. So again, I think that is more comparable to how it's going to be, because again, it's not like Northwestern, Indiana, Rutgers, whoever it may be, are trying to lose football games.
So Connor Clark will have Brandon Vogel join us next segment, gaze his thoughts on this, managing editor of Hail Varsity magazine. He joins us next here on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
A Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio rolls on. We're presented by Currency. It's Elijah Herbel and Connor Clark. We're hearing this new but old intro yet again. I know Brandon, I saw him bobbing his head to this one. It's one I made a couple years ago. I kind of went through it on the show yesterday. I forgot about it. I found it in the archives 2 days ago out of necessity, and I went, man, why did I ever put this one away? I should add this one to the rotation. So there's our new Hail Varsity rejoin intro for this week, as we're going to try to get you some new updated songs over the next couple weeks. Brandon, I asked yesterday on the show for any song requests for any bumper music as we do our rejoins. Got a couple thoughts in yesterday. You have any song requests for your segment as we come back from commercial break?
Oh, man. I feel like I should have a better answer off the top of my head. I think Schmitty already uses Pantera. Like, I always thought if I were a baseball player, and I mean, I played baseball as a youth, but a serious baseball player, like my walk-up music would probably be Walk by Pantera, because I was a decent fielder, and those pieces of it. I was not a good hitter. I was going up there hoping to walk. So I always felt like that was the move. And also that song hits.
No, it's funny, Brandon, that was your baseball experience, because I went up there hoping to walk and then hoping for the pinch runner to come in and run for me if I got to first base. That's why I quit baseball and started umpiring in the first place, was like, I was an all right pitcher, but I didn't get a pitch growing up. When I got up to the plate, it was like, man, if I make contact, that's a good at-bat. And then if I get on base, I was way too slow to even go run the bases. So at some point, I just said, you know what? This whole baseball thing, it isn't for me. I'm going to go play football. And I guess I'll never get my own walk-up song.
Now you're scared of parents yelling at you from behind the dish.
Well, no, it's funny. Like, growing up playing baseball, I was always super scared of, like, whenever kid pitch started. Because now we got 10-year-olds with baseballs that are trying to take my head off. And I didn't quite like that. And it's funny that a couple years later, then I went and was the one guy standing behind the plate, having pitches thrown at my face, not being able to move. That was an interesting character development for me. But, Brandon, let's get to Husker sports. And eventually Husker football. But we're going to start this off with the Husker softball team. The news of the day, Jordy Bahl. Not necessarily a surprise after her announcement on Monday saying she wanted to return closer to home. Nebraska seemed to be the school that fit that bill. But today it's become official. Jordy Bahl is going to be a member of the Husker softball team. And I don't think it can be understated just how big a pickup this is for Rhonda Revelle and the Husker softball team.
Yeah, I don't think so either. In terms of, this Nebraska softball team has been good, like an NCAA tournament team the past 2 seasons, and Courtney Wallace, kind of their number one pitcher, has carried a lot of the load, which is what happens in softball. They're losing her. And they're replacing her with one of the best players in the sport currently. Like, I'm not a person who thinks everything needs to be filtered through Husker football or even any other Husker sport. But I've had a tough time coming up with like an equivalent of like a homegrown Husker who gets to go to the best program in her sport, and then 2 years later, winning 2 national titles, decides, you know what, I'm going to go back. And I think, that's the thing that stands out to me about this, beyond the like on-field implications of like, this is a unique choice. There's not a lot of college athletes that I've encountered who would be like, you know what I'm going to do? I've kind of everything at Oklahoma in my mind, viewing it from afar. I haven't spoken with Jordy, but like seems like as good as it can get. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back home and try to, I thought her statements, both of her statements, the initial one saying I'm coming back to the state of Nebraska, and then today is saying I'm coming back to Nebraska, were excellent. So it's just, I kind of marvel at the uniqueness of what this is.
This, to me, to make it a football comparison, which, as you said, don't always have to do it, but I'm going to do it because I saw the comparison out there. This is like if Alabama's starting quarterback goes off, wins a national title, and goes and plays for Auburn. I think it's a little different than that. I think it's more similar to if Bryce Young steps in, wins a college football playoff, is great for the Crimson Tide, and then says, you know what? I need to be closer to home. I'm going to transfer to Pitt. That's what it feels like in terms of I don't want to call it a step down is disparaging towards Husker softball. I don't want to call it that, but Oklahoma is the powerhouse. They're the dynasty in college softball right now, and she's leaving that to come back home and really, be the best player on the in-state team.
Yeah, in the the former case, you get to just go out and be excellent. And in the Nebraska case, the hope is that you'll continue to be excellent, which I don't think there's any reason to doubt that she will, but it comes with a little bit more. And, it almost feels like you're signing up for some extra credit. That's maybe not the right term, but it's the one that comes to mind of like, hey, I'm going to do this. Like, it feels like an adventure, I guess, would be the best way to put it. And I mean that in the best way possible of like, yeah, let's go see what we can do at Nebraska.
Well, this is kind of anti-trend when it comes to sports as of late, because usually somebody's leaving to go join the good team, right? And not that Nebraska isn't good. Nebraska, as you said, has been a tournament team the past couple of years. So they're a good softball program by a large stretch. They won the Big Ten tournament last year. So, I mean, this is a good team she's coming to, but she's leaving a team that just won 53 in a row and won 2 straight national titles, and now she's coming back to Nebraska. What kind of expectations now do you put, obviously very long time away from when Jordy Bahl actually takes the field over at Bowlin Stadium, but what kind of expectations does this give Husker Nation now, and how far does the bar raise from where it already was?
Yeah, I think, and I'm, I try to be conscious of like, it's going to be impossible. It's going to be hard. Like this is such a kind of unique situation of not putting too much on her for the team's overall success. But like, I think you immediately vault towards like, hey, if this results in 2 Big Ten titles, conference titles, like probably worked. And if you win 2 Big Ten titles, well, then you're in the tournament for sure. And now you got one of the best pitchers in the tournament. Like, let's see where it goes from there. Because I mean, you guys know whether it's softball, whether it's baseball, like having that pitcher who is just that good can take you a pretty long way.
I don't know what's going on here, Brandon. My hot buttons are firing without me clicking anything. So apologies to any listeners who hear any weird sounds in the background. Never seen that one before. It's been a week of technical difficulties here at Hail Varsity Radio. We power on, though. And Brandon, just a general thought here with where women's sports are at Nebraska right now. Can Nebraska get a softball game in Memorial Stadium? Is that possible?
I mean, maybe now. Like we're trying to track down. Yeah, we're trying to track down some actual numbers on it. I know Nebraska softball put out a tweet earlier today about season tickets, and we had already kind of heard that even at the moment where we didn't know if she was officially coming to Nebraska, but she was coming home, so to speak, like season ticket sales were surging. So it might be, I think softball Memorial Stadium is probably at least a year away, but it's not out of the question, which I think feels like a pretty massive jump.
Brandon Vogel's with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, let's switch gears here, talk some football. As Connor and I were discussing back in the first segment, the model of what European soccer does in terms of being a potential model for college football to follow. We talked yesterday about how college football feels like it's moving closer and closer to the NFL. But whenever you look at European soccer, I think you see some parallels with there being the quote-unquote blue bloods, those teams that are always going to be in the top four of the English Premier League, and they're going to go and get pieces from these lower-level teams in order to complete their roster. And maybe it's crazy. I think a system of promotion and relegation could work in college football as well. You might really piss off some presidents and chancellors and athletic directors around the country, but I think you could pull it off. Do you see anything from European soccer that could be used as college football modernizes and goes into a new era with conference realignment and an expanded playoff?
Yeah, it's something I've thought about quite a bit. And as like me personally, I grew up in a area of the country where there essentially was no soccer. Like you could play youth soccer, but there was no high school soccer. So I became like a soccer fan kind of later in life. And you get enraptured with it. And I think you see this with like the intense following that MLS and even levels below that in the US have. You've got the supporter groups, like in a lot of ways, like it mimics what happens in Europe for those people that are really, really into soccer. And it's been cool to watch that grow. At an earlier time, I kind of looked at European soccer and I was like, man, I wish we had that in the US, just like that level of passion, of excitement. And then I kind of realized that, like, I think college football is it. And for some people, the NFL is it. But I think college football, with the size of there being, 130 plus FBS teams at this point, is and the fact that it happens all over the place, not just in the big cities, but in Laramie, Wyoming, really kind of draws that home. So I think it is our closest equivalent to European football in a lot of ways, and I love that about it. The promotion and relegation thing, I'm super on board with. I don't know. I look at it from a kind of like American culture standpoint, and I'll put it this way. You look at England with like the FA Cup, which is different from promotion and relegation, but you're like, oh yeah, maybe this pub team, if they just keep winning, they might play Man City, in Wembley Stadium at the end of it all. A bunch of guys who have full-time jobs doing something else. There's just so many competing interests, and it's so different from how American sports started that, while I would love to see it, and I think it would add some value in a lot of ways for a lot of sports in America, I just don't know. I have a hard time seeing us ever getting there.
Well, the comparison that I made with Elijah in the first segment, too, was next year in the Big Ten, when you get rid of the divisions and then you have the true top two best teams that go to the Big Ten championship. I mean, that's kind of Premier League-ish. I'm not a big soccer guy as well, but, I mean, I made the argument that nobody's trying to lose, and I know we're running up a hard break here, so I'll let Elijah take it back.
Yeah, Brandon, appreciate you chiming in. Do you want to stick around for another segment and continue this conversation? It's up to you.
Sure, I'm in.
So you're the one who's got vacation coming up. I'm not sure we can call it vacation, but you're the one who's got some time off coming up, so I'll leave it up to you.
I'll finish my question on the other side. How about that?
Yeah, we'll have another segment with Brandon Vogel coming your way after the break here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. More with Vogel in 3 minutes here on Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Thursday edition here at Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. We welcome Brandon Vogel back in for another segment here as we're talking college football and maybe that European soccer model. Maybe we're completely off base here, but I think there are some comparisons to be made. You can find him and follow him on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. And I guess I'll turn it over to Connor. Connor, you're the one who had the question that we cut you off on.
Yeah, so I was making the comparison to what will be the Big Ten next year. No divisions. The top two make the Big Ten championship game, obviously. And that feels more like the Premier League. And what I brought up to Elijah, too, is not like the bottom tier teams are trying to lose, right, with the relegation process. Like, I don't know if I would be a huge fan of that, especially in collegiate athletics when you pay, to be in a conference and you get all these other things by being in the Big Ten, right? And then you get relegated to, the example we used was the MAC in hour one. So, is that kind of a more fair comparison to European soccer? Because you get the Big Ten and you get college football as is, and now you finally get the top two teams playing for that conference title.
And Brandon, you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we are headed that way as conferences get larger. Like, you just look at this from, I guess, Nebraska's perspective, and like, okay, what did it take? What would it take to win the Big Ten this year? Well, you're in the Big Ten West, where Wisconsin is right now the kind of loose favorite. Iowa's up there. Then you got a bunch of teams that are kind of been like, I don't know, 6-7 wins maybe, and Nebraska's in that group. This is really the Big Ten West in a lot of years, and somebody's going to win that. And if you win that, you get the chance to go. I think Northwestern in 2020 is a great example. Like, won in the pandemic year, and then they got a chance to go play kind of big beastly Ohio State and nearly knocked them off, like had them on the ropes for a while. So like it gets harder. Everybody has to raise their level. And for us who cover Nebraska primarily and know like what that level is historically and what it has been recently, it's a big jump up. And it's funny you mentioned the MAC. Like when I think about this, it's always kind of the thing I think about. It's like, oh, maybe you pair them up with conferences that are kind of closest or whatever. Like, how would you guys feel if Nebraska, because it probably would have been at some point over the past 3-4 years, all of a sudden was playing in the MAC for a season?
On one hand, Husker fans would hate it, but on the other hand, I can see the argument of you get a chance to go down to the MAC and get your feet under you. Your conference slate doesn't involve you playing Michigan and USC and Ohio State anymore. You have to play on Tuesdays, yeah, but you get a chance. You're still in Nebraska. Would it be harder to get some recruits? Yes. Could Nebraska still go fill their class up with 3 stars, maybe even some 4 stars? I fully believe so. You get to play an easier slate every single year, and then your goal will go make it to the MAC championship game, and you can go earn your way back up into the Big Ten. And hey, let's not forget here, this also gives a chance for, I can't remember who won the MAC last year. I think, was it Ohio? It gives a chance for Ohio to go up. Maybe it was Toledo. One of the two. They had a great season. They get a chance to go up and test what they've got in the Big Ten. And you know what? If you don't finish last in the Big Ten, you get a stick and stay, and you get all those TV media rights money because you're making a more competitive Big Ten, while a team that was down on its luck last year gets a chance to get its feet under itself in the MAC. Yeah,
I mean, I think you nailed it. Like, it would be a hard thing for fans to get used to. Like, if you're a fan of a Toledo or an Ohio, you're like, oh, this is amazing. But if you're a fan of a Nebraska, and I mean, I think this is probably the biggest hurdle to overcome. Like, we're just not used to that piece of it here. And like, it's interesting as TV revenue has grown, like it really becomes, and I forget the number, but like, you know, in the Premier League, that final Sunday of the season, you know, they bill those relegation games as like the $200 million game or whatever it is, because that's the difference. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're in the Premier League, like, you're getting this much. If you're not, like, you take a severe hit and you lose a ton of your players. So it's just incredibly high stakes. It would be fascinating to watch unfold. That said, like, I mean, I think if that were our operating model, like, despite all of Nebraska's kind of struggles over the past couple of years, like, I don't think they would have stayed in the MAC long. So I can see that point of view of like, hey, like, okay, go back there and be like, hey, if we want to get back to being Nebraska, first thing we got to do is win the MAC, which seems like such a bizarre concept, but maybe it would have been useful.
As I said, it'd probably be a tough sell to some chancellors, presidents, and ADs, but I think it could make for a really, really intriguing college football. And from a TV rights point of view, a lot more games that you can sell as being big labels opposed to just, well, it's top 10 matchup. Brandon, before we get you out of here, I need to get your thought. If you could choose any college football mascot from across the country and prepare it in a dish, what are you choosing and what dish are you preparing for your dinner crowd?
Oh, so I'm cooking a college football mascot?
Yeah, I'll give you an example here. I think my choice would probably be I'm going down to Arkansas and I'm taking the Razorback pig, and I'm going to probably do ribs for my dinner guests. Barbecued, maybe even a peach glaze of sorts.
Yeah, that's good. And that actually was my first thought.
I didn't mean to take it from you.
No, it's okay. I think Virginia Tech would be in the mix, though. Like, turkey can be really hit or miss. So I think the answer is Texas. Like, give me a cow. Like, I'll take a brisket. I'll take beef ribs. I'll take all of that stuff, steaks, etc. I think Bevo, unfortunately, for Bevo is the move.
Brandon, appreciate your time here on a Thursday afternoon. We'll get Connor's take on this here in just a second, but you have yourself I guess as nice of a 2 weeks off as you can. Enjoy the paternity leave, and we'll talk to you in July.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
See you, Brandon. Big thanks to Brandon Vogel joining us here. So, Connor, I say I'm going to Arkansas and I'm getting a pig, a Razorback pig, and I'm going to turn that into ribs. What are you going with?
I like both your answers, actually. And I was leaning towards the Bevo answer as well. But and this is a dish that I haven't actually had in a very long time, but it was really, really good. I'm going to go with the Oregon duck.
Yes!
And make some duck wings, because duck is really, really good. Like that, I'm a dark meat guy too, so I think that would be the mascot. Just to not have a repeat, I think that's the one I would go to, is the duck.
And I tell you how I'm doing it. I'm going to confit those wings. I'm going to take myself some oil and essentially boil them at a low temperature in that oil, fall off the bone, some sort of barbecue glaze you can put on the top, maybe over a bed of greens or a bed of rice. That would be fantastic. South Carolina Gamecocks, another good option. If you're not a big fan of duck, you can go with the chicken. One of the ones that I'm going to be staying away from, USC.
Yeah, I don't think you want to eat a Trojan.
Yeah,
that'd be kind of weird.
I think that's illegal in most states, if not all states.
I think so. I think just like you probably just shouldn't do that regardless. I was kind of hoping we get an answer that would be like so outlandish that people have like maybe had like a tiger before and somewhere. That's also probably illegal in a lot of places. But I like the Arkansas answer. I think the Bevo answer is good, and I'll complete the trio with the duck.
There's plenty to stay away from. Georgia, stay away from the Bulldog.
Yes.
Florida State, stay away from the Simba. Anyone that's a human mascot.
Stay away from the Cornhuskers, man.
Oh, it depends if we're talking about the person or like the instrument that they used to put on their hands back in the day to husk the corn. Both you stay away from, I guess. We've gone off the rails here. Hail Varsity Radio continues after the break.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Hail Varsity Radio rolls forward as we wrap up hour one here on Hail Varsity Radio. We heard from Brandon Vogel in a little bit of overtime. You can catch Brandon Vogel talking Jordy Bahl as well as the college football, maybe using European soccer as an example moving forward. How would that work? We got Brandon's take on that, as well as which college football mascot he would be most likely to serve at a dinner party, as we've got a good hour two coming your way as well. After the break, we'll have 8-time College World Series umpire. He spent some time in the majors, spent years and years working college baseball. Jeff Henrichs, he's a Lincoln East grad. He's back living in the state now, as he is somewhat retired from umpiring college baseball. He keeps it a little more local now, and we're going to get his thoughts on the College World Series, some of his best stories from both Rosenblatt, TD Ameritrade, now Charles Schwab Field. We'll also have Manny here on Coffee and Cream every single morning. Andrew Rogers, he joins our friend Damon Binning from 7 to 10 every single morning. So Andrew's going to join us and discuss a little bit of the College World Series, his thoughts on Jordy Bahl, and what the Hurrdat family of networks, we're going to call it that? Sure, we'll call it that. The Hurrdat family of networks has coming your way next week in Omaha. We'll be at Zipline. They'll be at the Slowdown. We'll hear a little bit more from Andrew on that. And we will get another edition of Burke's Best Bets with Danny Burke rocking as he's going to preview some of his favorite betting lines for the weekend and which way you should bet to make some money. Danny Burke here to make you some money, the pride of Chicago. So that's all coming your way next hour. Connor, before we get you out of here, as I know you got work to do, you down at Haymarket Park, bearing through the high heat for a Salt Dogs game. Is it a rubber match tonight?
It sure is. Rubber match, and I don't really have to worry about the heat right now because it's air conditioned in the booth, so that's awesome.
Connor Clark, he's down at Haymarket Park. I want to get your reaction to this. We're going to get Jeff Henrichs' take on this as well, but I'm not sure if he's before your time, Connor. Augie Garrido.
Yes, definitely before.
He was a longtime coach. Husker fans remember him from his time at Texas. I know he won a couple of College World Series and more Big Ten titles during his time down in Austin as well. But in honor of the College World Series getting going, the late, great Augie Garrido with one of the best post-game speeches you will ever hear after his team dropped a disappointing game mid-season, and they went off to reel off something like 15 straight wins after this en route to a Big 12 tournament title as well as, I believe, a College World Series title this year. Here is Augie Garrido.
That is the most humiliating game in the last 10 years I've been involved with. How can we get picked off at first base? How can you do that? The is that about? What do you think you're with here? This isn't about some game. This is about our lives. Don't you get it? Don't you get it? You don't have a choice. When I tell you to take, you take. Don't tell me you don't see it. You look. You understand? I don't give a like I said, 15 minutes from now, you don't give a you walk out of here. I gotta live with this embarrassing game the rest of my life.
That's like
I am totally failed you guys. We got beat at every single part of this. Everything.
That's like the extremely explicit version of the Tim Tebow, we have 30 minutes. That's one of my favorite speeches. But yeah, that was good. That's good stuff.
Late, great Augie Garrido. We're going to get Jeff Henrichs, his take on Augie Garrido. I just had to play that. We had a listener send that to me. I saw it on my feed about earlier this week. I knew we had to play it on Hail Varsity Radio, so we're going to talk about that a little bit more coming your way after the break as longtime College World Series umpire Jeff Henrichs joins us.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
We're back in. It's hour 2 of Hail Varsity Radio, where we're presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Got a big hour 2 planned for you. It's here in about 20 minutes. We'll be talking with Andrew Rogers. You hear him on Coffee and Cream, and you'll see him up next week at the College World Series. We'll get caught up with him here in about 20 minutes. And then later this hour, we'll have Danny Burke, another edition of Burke's Best Bets, as he previews the weekend slate of MLB games and maybe some College World Series as well. But where we started out this hour is with a longtime college baseball umpire. He worked 8 College World Series between 2003 and 2021. He's helped out my umpiring game as well personally. Also, your man, if you need to buy a house here in the city of Lincoln, work with him and Keller Williams. It's Jeff Henrichs, Lincoln East grad, joining us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Jeff, it's good to get caught up with you here on the air yet again, as it's somewhere in Nebraska. College World Series getting underway tomorrow.
Hey, Elijah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, what a great time. You know, Omaha is buzzing, and when you just hear people all around the country just, you know, they say Omaha, it's the place to be in college baseball. So for the next 10 days, I'm sure all of us Nebraskans will show everybody a great time and what the College World Series is all about.
And Jeff, before we get to some of your memories of the College World Series, I want to start this off with a topic we've hit a fair amount here this week on Hail Varsity Radio. Rob Childress, He's been elevated to pitching coach for the University of Nebraska. I know you've gotten the chance to work with him not only at Nebraska but also during his time at Texas A&M and before that as well. So, Jeff, I want to get your thoughts on what Rob's elevation is going to mean for this Husker pitching staff and maybe some memories that you have working for Rob Childress.
Well, that's a good question. I'm old school, and Coach Childress is old school. He likes to throw fastballs. He likes to challenge people. He likes to come inside. He doesn't like to walk people. So he plays the game the right way. I think it'll be a great addition for the baseball program, and he's good people. Down in we got along with him pretty well. When things weren't going well, he'd get a little upset, but it was always good to work with him. Back in 2015, I went to the World Series, and I was the crew chief. Cal came in there, and I don't remember who the other two schools were, but I've talked about this before. My son had just been diagnosed with a very rare autoimmune disease, and I had the 2-3 seed at the time. It was Cal and somebody, and we had nothing but one-run games in the regional. It's probably the worst plate job that I've ever had. Thank God Twitter wasn't that big at the time, because I probably would have been getting all kinds of hits. But he just, all of the coaches just kind of came up, and David Esker, who's with Stanford now, was the Cal coach at the time, and Coach Childress wasn't worried about anything else but my son. So if you just realize that it's a bunch of people in this game, he's one of the best, and I think from a fire standpoint and getting his pitchers going and throwing strikes, I think it'll be a great thing for the Nebraska baseball team.
It's a longtime college baseball umpire Jeff Henrichs. 8 times he worked the College World Series, joining us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Jeff, before we get into the College World Series here, take me back to your first College World Series back in, I believe it was 2003. Just the process it took, the years of work it took to get up and get selected for your first College World Series, and what that meant to you.
Well, it was 20 years ago. 20 years ago right now at Rosenblatt. What a special place. Elijah, when you get that first phone call or you get 7 more, it never gets old. That's what you work for. I can remember walking up. We parked right along left field, and there was all these ESPN trucks, but then they had just repainted them and said ESPN HD. And we're like, what the heck is HD? As we walked into the locker room, we walked through the trucks and everything like that. And I had a bunch of close plays that first time at the World Series in 2003, and Harold Reynolds was still the color man for ESPN, and it was kind of funny at the end. He just kind of said, man, Jeff Henrichs should be the MVP because he's got all these close calls and he's got them right. And then I had one to start the final series with Rice and Stanford, and I think Stanford scored 3 or 4 in the first inning, and I called the guy out for Stanford on a very close play at second base to end the inning. And they went to commercial, and Harold goes, well, I think he finally missed one. It took him 2 weeks to miss one. And that's when we were wearing hat cam at second base. And they come back on and say, well, Jeff, if you're watching, or when you do get to watch, we were all kind of laughing when we saw the replay because, no, we're not watching. But I owe you an apology. And they went to hat cam, and you can just barely see that they tagged him out just in time before the runner got to second base. So that, we don't like to miss any, and that's a good thing about replay, but that's the first thing I kind of remember about 2003.
Longtime College World Series umpire Jeff Henrichs with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Jeff, last segment we heard that iconic Augie Garrido speech. I believe it was from the 2005 season, in which he really laid into his team after what he considered an embarrassing loss. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, they went on to win a national title that year. And I want to know, do you have any good memories or bad memories of the late, great Augie Garrido working for him?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if they won the World Series that year, but I think they went on to win like 18 straight in the Big 12 championship. Mm-hmm. But he, Elijah, what you saw, he was the best to work for.
Really?
He was old school. He appreciated umpires. And it was either I think it was the 2007 World Series, the second time I went. Jim, my son, was probably like an 8th grader, and I was at third base. And down there they had, the handicapped seating section. And so my son was right next to there, and Tony Maynard was working the plate, and it was really hot for the last game, and all the balls were getting sweaty in the ball bag. So, I always kind of pulled some pranks on my son. So after the half inning, I go, Timmy, get ready. You're going to go in there to the dugout, which is Texas dugout on the third base side, and you're going to be the ball boy and throw the balls to Tony when they go out of play because he can't keep them in his ball bag because they're too wet. So all of a sudden, after the next half inning, I grab him and I take him down there, and the NCAA didn't know it. And all of a sudden, Timmy's standing next to Augie Garrido, and Augie kind of looks over at him and he says, "Hey, young man, what's your name?" And he says, "Timmy." He says, "Timmy, how you doing?" He goes, "Good, Coach. Good to see you." And Coach Garrido says, "You can't sit there. You got to get the hell out of the way so I can see my catcher." And Timmy says, "Yes, sir." And then after the first ball went out of play, Timmy kind of soft tossed it into the catcher, and Coach Garrido told him, "What the hell is that? Get out there and throw it, son." And so after the next pitch, Timmy starts throwing him from the third base dugout to the catcher, and then all of a sudden, the next thing you know is Augie just pat him on the back and go walk him back into the middle of the dugout so he approves. So, those are some of the things that I can probably say on air. There's a whole lot more I could probably say off air, but, we can't do that. But what a great baseball coach and icon, and he was just a great human being and a great baseball coach.
Have you ever worked for any other coaches that are like that, where they have this hard exterior, and whenever they're coaching baseball, they seem like the meanest guy in the world, but deep down they're actually, I don't want to say a softie at heart, but they actually have a lot of love in there?
There's just a lot of different coaches that, when you talk about, that's a great question, because sometimes baseball is not so much about balls and strikes and safes and outs, but it's about dealing with personalities. Mm-hmm. And now that, the money and the salaries have gotten so high with the coaches, the pressure is that way. And so as an umpire, we have to deal with their personalities even more. I mean, I'll take the opposite end of the spectrum, and Coach O'Connor that's coming in for Virginia. I was behind the plate in 2015, called the last strike three when they beat Vanderbilt for the national championship. And, he's the opposite of Coach Garrido, but just the same way. He's a great person. He cares about people. He cares about his players, and he cares about umpires. And that goes a long way. Of you want to go out and work hard for Augie because of the way he is, but you also want to go out and work hard for Coach O'Connor because of the way he is. So, kind of going about a roundabout way of that question. There's a lot of good people, and it's just like the world we live in today. There's probably 97% of good coaches, and then the other 3%. But they're all good guys and good human beings, and they're trying to win.
It's Jeff Henrichs with us here on Hail Varsity Radio, talking College World Series. He worked 8 of them, and Jeff, I want to take you through some of the more recent games that I know that you worked, some of the more iconic moments we've seen in the College World Series over the past couple years. And I want to start it off with, I believe it was 2017, Arkansas and Oregon State, where there's the foul ball out behind first base and it gets dropped, and lo and behold, it really changed the outcome of the game.
Yeah, it was 2018. I had game 2 behind the plate, and it's the top of the 9th, and, Arkansas's, Coach Van Horn, Coach Childress that were here at Nebraska, they're going to win the national championship. I did a lot of games in the Pac-12, and, you're just trying to stay focused and not anything have happen, just especially in the last game, last few pitches, you want to make sure you're right, and, it's not on you. And all of a sudden that ball goes up towards back behind first base over, kind of in the big area of foul ball territory. And I'd had a really good game behind the plate. And, I see that ball go up, and you kind of just take a deep breath and go, pat yourself on the back and go, way to go. You got out of here unscathed, nothing happened, and kind of start backtracking towards the locker room. I took about 3 or 4 steps, and all of a sudden the ball's on the ground. And I'm like, oh, no, now you got to kind of regroup. And then the next pitch, their shortstop hit it through the 5-6 hole for a base hit. And then Trevor Larnach hit the next pitch over the fence for a home run, and Oregon State ends up winning. And then they won the national championship the next day. But I had a couple buddies that came from California that had never been to the College World Series that we got to work together in 2021, and I think that's the most electric that I've ever seen. TD Ameritrade, I know it's called Charles Schwab now, but that place was going crazy, and it was just, was just kind of surreal to see the ball drop and then, here we go again and, have to kind of concentrate and get your mind and your thinking back to get through the next few outs to the top of the ninth and then get through the bottom of the ninth. But, wow, that was one of I think that's the most exciting college baseball game that I've ever worked.
And Jeff, you mentioned real fast the Charles Schwab Field being the home of the College World Series, and you're a guy who's worked at both. You worked Rosenblatt, you worked Charles Schwab / TD Ameritrade, whatever you want to call it. What is the difference being on the field between those two venues? I know that this new stadium has allowed them to keep the College World Series in Omaha for the foreseeable future, but do you ever watch the College World Series and miss what Rosenblatt was?
Well, in 2009, we got a police escort for the final games. We stayed at the Courtyard Marriott right there on 10th and Dodge. Mm-hmm. And, there was 3 of us in the big black Chevy Suburbans with all kinds of motorcycle cops going around us and our families in there. And the final game is big for umpires, too, believe it or not. We, like I said before, we want to do a good job. We want to get everything right. And I can just remember we were all just sitting in that Suburban, just driving and watching the motorcycle guys go and stop the streets, and the lights are red and we're going through, and nobody said anything in the car. I mean, it was just like, wow, you were there. And then you go through Rosenblatt, and just all the history that you have there is something special. And then the new ballpark, how it is, and you're kind of more downtown, and everybody is there, and it's electric when you're walking in, and the buses drop somewhere off. I'm going to say this, and everybody asks me which one is better, and I'm going to say, anytime you can say that you were at Rosenblatt or TD Ameritrade or Charles Schwab and you're working the College World Series, that's the place to be. It's pretty special.
Jeff, last thought here before we get you out. Anything we didn't get to today, and I'm thinking particularly any stories from any pitchers that went on to do some big things in the majors, any teams that really stand out in your memory as being like, wow, I was lucky to get to work that game type moment?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would just say that, it's more about the umpires that I've got to work with and the friends and the guys that were working it for their first time and their families are in, and just the thrill of being on the field, with some of the guys that you've mentored that have made it, Phil Benson. We were together. I always called them Candies because we were at Washington, and when I first moved to Sacramento, I did a clinic and kind of changed the style he worked to make him a little more crisp and aggressive. And then when we went to Washington, it was cold, and he runs the Merrill Lynch office, so he makes 10 times the more money than I do. But he was nervous to work with me, and I just gave him a frozen Hershey bar. So he was on my crew in 2012, at the new stadium, and I didn't have game one behind the plate. I was at first and he was at second, and I had to put a Hershey's bar in the freezer. And then when we walked out there right before, I told him, he goes, "Oh my God, I'm so nervous. I got a bunch of butterflies." And I said, brother, it doesn't matter how many butterflies you have, just as long as they fly in formation, you'll be just fine. And I took that frozen Hershey's bar out of my pocket and gave it to him, and that was pretty cool.
It's your man to buy a house in Lincoln with Keller Williams. It's Jeff Henrichs, longtime college baseball umpire. He worked 8 College World Series, kind enough to give us 15 minutes here on a Thursday afternoon as we get you all geared up for the College World Series. Jeff, appreciate your time today, and you enjoy the College World Series all next week long, all right?
Thanks, Elijah. Thanks for having me. I look forward to watching you work and helping you out, brother.
Appreciate it, Jeff. So there he is, Jeff Henrichs, joining us. A Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. As good to get caught up with Jeff ahead of the College World Series. It's a man that's been there. It's a man that's done that. He understands the College World Series in and out, and he's got a lot of respect in the world of college baseball. We're going to take a quick break here, 3 minutes, and we return. Andrew Rogers, you hear him on Coffee and Cream. He's going to join us here on this Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, let you know what's coming up from Hurrdat next week in Omaha, as well as what he and Damon have planned their week of the College World Series. That's after the break here on Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Thursday edition here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency, as we just heard from longtime College World Series umpire Jeff Henrichs. If you missed that, check it out in podcast form, Hail Varsity's YouTube page. If you want the video, or Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon Music, all great places to go. If you didn't hear where you get podcasts, search up Hail Varsity Radio wherever you get podcasts. You should be able to find it. If you can't find it, give us an email, Elijah@Hurrdat.com, Chris@HailVarsity.com, and we'll get that sorted out for you. We're excited to welcome in another member of the Hurrdat family. You hear him every single morning on Coffee and Cream with Dame and Benning. It's Andrew Rogers joining us, and Andrew's in here. I'm not sure how I want to censor myself here. He's big you-know-what-in us with that Emmy in the background. Andrew, how you doing?
What's up, man? Hey, I feel bad for the people because they have to hear me in the morning, and now they have to hear me in the afternoon. Like, this must be devastating for everybody out there.
Well, as I said it yesterday on the show, there is a small subset of people that are Elijah Herbel fans, Andrew Rogers fans. It's the best day ever for those people. They got to hear a full 3 hours of you.
2 Fridays ago was, that was Christmas morning for everybody out there. But outside of those one-off moments, I'm not sure we have a lot of best friends out there, Elijah.
That's very true. Andrew, let's get to... Well, let's start with Husker sports. We got College World Series coming up. We'll get to Hurrdat's coverage of the College World Series and what we're going to be doing next week up in Omaha. We'll get to that here in just a second. I want to get some of your preview of the College World Series as well. But I want to start it off with the big news of the day in Husker Nation. Jordy Bahl, really the best college pitcher in the country right now. She won 2 national titles at Oklahoma. Now she is making her way back home. Going to be playing for the University of Nebraska. Your reaction to that and what that means for the Husker softball team moving forward?
Who's Jordy Bahl? Yeah, Jordy Bahl, what a phenomenal story she is. Great for Husker softball, great for Husker season tickets, great for just the state of Nebraska altogether, and especially those that play softball and look up to her and have looked up to her for years. You know, she did everything that she wanted to do at Oklahoma. She accomplished 2 national titles. She was the best pitcher in the game, and I have so much respect for her and making this move because she did it for her, if that makes sense. You know, she had mentioned that there was one little snippet that I took away from her post when she left Oklahoma, and it had everything to do with getting back to the place that made me who I am. And I can really relate with a line like that. You know, I'm a St. Louis boy at heart. My whole family's back in St. Louis. It's really tough to be away from family. Yes, I have family that, you know, I've just kind of like put together up here in Omaha. I did that in Sioux City, but it's not the same. And so I could really relate to what she was doing, what she had said, and how much that can weigh on a person. So by seeing the mature decision to make that decision to come back home, whether it's for Husker benefit or not, just great for Jordy Bahl, the person. And that's what I think I care about most.
And we have a quote in here from John Cook. This comes from our media partner at 1011, Kevin Suits. He says, "It's been a hell of a week, especially women's sports. I think Trev is trying to change our culture here and get back to maybe what we used to do and be the best at everything." What does that mean to you, Andrew, whenever you just think about how women's sports has been put on a pedestal at Nebraska? From volleyball, the women's basketball teams had some success in recent years, and now softball's looking to make a climb to the top as well.
Yeah, women's sports in general, it just gets overlooked. Even when you are the best program out there, unless you're from that state, it gets overlooked. I'll be completely honest. In St. Louis, did I ever watch Wisconsin volleyball, Nebraska volleyball, or any of the top volleyball programs? No. It's just because it's not broadcasted like it should be. Same thing with women's basketball. It doesn't get the same love as, you know, men's basketball. And to some degree, you understand with TV deals and things like that. And look, I put all of that aside. Women's sports in Nebraska is on fire. Absolute fire. You have immediate success right now in softball. Just by adding one player, you can already slot them in as the most likely to win the Big Ten. In basketball, this is a team that went over the ups and downs, right? They were on the roller coaster and they started to steady out toward the end and then just did the up climb. And then volleyball, we know how successful they've been and how impactful John Cook has been to that team here in the state. You have Jordan Larson coming back too, which is huge news. I mean, just think about what she does from a recruiting perspective and from a relational perspective with these ladies. If I knew I had an Olympian, arguably one of the best volleyball players in the world, coming back and coaching me, I mean, not to say that, this was a John Cook recruiting ploy, but that would make me, as one of the best players best high school players in the country, want to play for that program. So yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, women's sports is just, it's on fire at Nebraska, and next season, the whole season from fall to spring is going to be just kind of unbelievable, unimaginable.
Andrew Rogers is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. Check him out on Coffee and Cream every single morning from 7 to 10, him and Damon Binning. And Andrew, let's shift gears here. Talk College World Series as the greatest show on dirt gets going tomorrow afternoon out at Charles Schwab Field. Now, I just want to get your thoughts on what the field looks like this year. Do you have any early favorites to win the Jello Shot Challenge? And who do you think is going to be making a deep run in Omaha this year?
Hey, you started with Jello Shot Challenge. You're finding the way to my heart here, Elijah. Jello Shot, probably LSU. I think LSU is going to travel well. We know the teams in the South like to drink. We found that out over the last 2 years with Mississippi State and Ole Miss. So I'll take LSU to win the Shot Challenge. As for just looking at the field up and down. Oh, before I get there, because you're going to love this. So the last two years at the College World Series, I would go through FanFest. I'd walk through the tents. I'd find the T-shirt that had the best slogan. Mm-hmm. So 2021, it was Omaha Dogs for Mississippi State. I bought that shirt before the tournament even started. And then last year, I liked the baby blue of Ole Miss. Yep. So I bought Omaha. They ended up winning. So, Elijah, let me tell you, the shirt I buy this year is the winning team. I'm going to let everybody know that now. I'm 2-0. You got to ride with me. And that team still, not only did I mention them for the Jello Shot Challenge, will probably be the shirt I buy tomorrow. They had the best shirt down there. It was Gomaha, and it was the GEAUX Omaha. That was catchy as all heck, and there were some really bad ones. Let me tell you. Oralaha, not a fan. Pretty cringeworthy. Stanford didn't even have one. I went through every tent and I asked every vendor, and they did not have a T-shirt for that team that was something catchy. And maybe it goes hand in hand with what resulted in the Jello Shot Challenge last year when they hit an all-time school record for themselves of 231. To put that in perspective, Ole Miss had 18,000. Okay, now let's move on to the field. I'll actually talk sports now. 7 of the 8 teams were preseason top 20. Like, let's not forget that. This field is incredible. You have Wake Forest, essentially the team with no flaws. LSU, the team with the top prospects. Virginia, they just give me championship vibes. Don't ask me why. I am just on the Virginia train for some reason. Florida becomes that forgotten team because they just don't score all that much. And I think they just go under the radar. They don't win games by more than like 5 or 6 runs, but they also don't allow more than like 1 or 2 runs most games. So watch out for the Gators, or Omachomp, which is on their shirt. TCU could be labeled the hottest team right now. Tennessee, the team that scares people, right? You have this is a team last year that we all thought was going to win before regional play even started, and then they pulled in Arkansas. So Tennessee this year getting this far with the pitching they have. Chase Dollander, he will be a top 10 pick. Him against Paul Skeens on Saturday is going to be the most anticipated pitching matchup of this entire tournament, which is why Charles Schwab Field is ticketing that game as the highest price. I couldn't believe some of the prices for this game, but I get it because you're getting Tennessee and Chase and Paul Skeens at LSU. Mm-hmm. But you look at Tennessee's rotation, and there's a guy on there by the name of Drew Beam. Okay, Drew Beam has been absolutely incredible down the stretch of this season. He is their third pitcher, their number 3 in the rotation. he would be a number one on most teams. And I stand by that. Like, Drew Beam is a beast. So if they fall to the loser's bracket, don't count out Tennessee because they have the depth to make their way back. Stanford, we already talked about how they have the worst yellow shot taking fan base and the worst T-shirt. What if we just skip over them?
And they probably also had the worst path into the College World Series as well with that drop ball in the bottom of the ninth.
Yeah, they're jamming out to Blinding Lights to start today or this weekend's game, right? They're only playing the weekend. That's it. But no, their team is good. They're kind of also a team that's flying under the radar. Like, remember Drew Bowser? Remember Eddie Park? Remember Tommy Troy? Like, these were all players that we talked about last year with this unbelievable Stanford offense, and then they could not get out of the first round. I mean, they lost their first game, and then they lost to Auburn, and they were just knocked out. They just went home. And then the last team, Oral Roberts. Who doesn't want to root for the underdog? This is one of my favorite stories, not only because they play in the Summit League, and of course UNO is a big piece of that too. But when you watch what they did in the Super Regionals, remember they were up 8-0 in game one, 8-0, and then they blew it down the stretch. You would think a team, a 4 seed, and a team that plays in the Summit League would probably just fold to the pressure. But no, they came back in game 2 and won on a walk-off. They ended up scoring 3 runs in the last 2 innings to win that game by 1. And then they just blow off Oregon's doors in game 3 to move on. This is not a Cinderella team. This is a team that knows they belong in Omaha.
Last thought here, Andrew, about 30 seconds left. Where can the folks catch you and Damon next week, all week long in Omaha? How do the people come say hi to you?
Man, I just talk, don't I? Like, how is there already 30 seconds left? We will be at Let It Fly tomorrow. Okay. So live on remote at Let It Fly. We will do some remotes at Zipline Brewing next week, which is right across from the stadium. So come check us out. I don't know, to be honest, I don't know if the bar is going to be open. But what I do know is we're going to be having some fun at 7 o'clock in the morning.
It's Andrew Rogers joining us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Andrew, can we say that you're behind LSU this tournament?
Ah, man.
Bandwagon yes. LSU fan?
Yes, hey. Yes. I think if I had to put real money down, it's on Wake Forest. But in my T-shirt game, it's LSU, so they'll win.
Well, if you get a chance to meet Livy, we'll call it a win. It's Andrew Rogers joining us here on Hail Varsity Radio.
Don't tell that to my fiance.
I won't. Catch him on Coffee and Cream. Andrew, appreciate the time here this afternoon.
See you, man.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Rolling through a Thursday edition, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, and it's about that time again. Time to make you some money as we welcome in the pride of Chicago, Danny Burke, joining us here. Burke's Best Bets on Hail Varsity Radio. Danny, how are you doing today? You staying cool as the summer weather seems to hit most of the Midwest here today?
Oh, yeah. We're hanging in there. We got a little rough patch today for us here, but I'm making my way out to the Cubs game, so hopefully it stays somewhat decent, and we could get a Cubbies victory tonight, and then it would be no complaints here on the north side.
You have any plays on the Cubs tonight? They're hosting the Pirates, is that right?
Yeah, so they're going for the series sweep here, and they got their ace Stroman on the bump, and I wouldn't really recommend it now just because the price has gotten so inflated, but the Cubs were a team that I was targeting tonight, and I'll be throwing an obligatory bet on the Cubs because every time I'm there, I always look for some kind of angle. And with the sweep on the line, the Cubs' bats are coming alive. The weather is going to be really poor. Again, the wind's blowing and it's a little chillier, but Oviedo's opposing. Stroman on the bump for the Pirates. His numbers are pretty awful, and we know that Stroman has been an absolute stud this year. So what I'm getting to that I was going to say is that the Cubs lineup is always wishy-washy because sometimes David Ross is just throwing the most obscene lineups out there, but they actually have pretty much a competent one for tonight's game, which caused the line to move up once again. So I would be looking toward the Cubs if you don't mind laying the steep price, but be cautious.
Danny Burke joining us here at Burke's Best Bets as Danny's going to make you some money this weekend, giving you all the plays that you need to know. And Danny, before we get too deep on what's coming up in the MLB, and maybe, I know you're typically not a guy who bets the College World Series. Maybe we'll just get your read on that a little bit later. But first, Nuggets Championship Parade was this morning. I know you had a little bit of money on the Nuggets to go and do this, and I also want to get your thoughts on how the Stanley Cup Finals played out for you. Did you end up making some money in the long run?
Yeah, so with the championship, again, props to your Nuggets, man. They made me a little bit of coin there a couple different ways with a plus 750 and a 7-1 futures bet on them. That was still available at the beginning of the postseason, which really just did not make sense to me once it was clear that they were the most organized team, had the most depth, and you saw that be so persistent throughout this postseason with a lot of role players stepping up. Heck, Jamal Murray didn't have a good game. Hey, Michael Porter Jr. didn't even have a good series. You had a guy like Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon, those type of dudes, and then Braun even stepping up and making the most of it. And that's what it takes to be a championship-caliber team, and Denver was by far the most deserving group to figure it out and end up being victorious. So props to Denver. And then on the Stanley Cup side, Elijah, yeah, the Golden Knights, a team that I really was not that high on even heading into the postseason, did make us some coin as well. We took them to win the series, minus 125, also to cover a game and a half on the series spread, meaning they had to win in a sweep, 5 or 6, and then that cashed at plus 175. DGK, again, we talk about depth, but in hockey, they exemplified the most of it this postseason. And Aiden Hill stepped in, their netminder, came in a little bit less than halfway, or a little bit more than halfway through. And look, this guy was an absolute stud between the pipes. He was even better than Bobrovsky, who was the best goaltender far and away leading into the championship round. So Aiden Hill stepped up when he needed to. Florida's magic ran out, and Vegas proved that they, again, had the most depth and could really answer the call to any type of adversity, and, again, more than deserving to be victorious in their own respect.
It's Danny Burke with us here, Burke's Best Bets, Hail Varsity Radio. And Danny, let's shift gears here, talk some baseball. You already talked about what you got coming for the Cubs tonight. Any other games you like tonight or this weekend? As I know there's some intriguing series coming down in the MLB over the weekend. And the story in baseball right now, could it be the Oakland A's with that reverse boycott they had the other night? They're on a hot streak. They take on Philadelphia this weekend. Well, what do you like in major league plays over the weekend?
Yeah, so tonight, the actual play that I had and I gave out was a no-run in the first inning between Minnesota and Detroit. Sonny Gray and Matthew Boyd taking the bump for each respective group. Sonny Gray's been an absolute stud. This Twins rotation is really lethal. It's just a matter of if they can keep hitting and try to be better at scoring with runners in scoring position. That was kind of their fault. Yes, they've gotten hits, but they haven't capitalized consistently. And now you're seeing them turn it around a little bit in a weaker AL Central. So Sonny's been a stud. The Tigers really have been struggling hitting righties, especially on the road this year. And Sonny Gray's numbers, the first time through the starting rotation, he's got a 1.53 FIP. Now, fielding independent of pitching is what FIP is, and it's more of a true predictive estimation of what his ERA really would be, and that number is outstanding. And then for Matthew Boyd, the southpaw's a guy who I don't want to trust. So originally I was looking at Minnesota, but then you look a little bit deeper, and because the Twins are such a big favorite, I was looking for a different angle. And I like the no-run in the first because I just said what I liked about Sonny Gray. But Boyd, where he does actually do better, is in the front order of the rotation as well. So the first time through the starting lineup, that's when he performs his best. And the Twins actually are really struggling against southpaws this season. So minus 115 was the best number I saw. A lot of them were minus 130. I wouldn't bet it over that. But look for the no-run in the first for the Tigers and the Twins tonight. And then for this weekend, Elijah, I haven't gone too crazy in it. I got to wait to see some of these pitchers who are going to be listed more so and where these lines populate. But I think a really interesting series to keep an eye on certainly has to be the Rays and the Padres. San Diego, we're hoping they can keep their bats going and come alive so they can be a bettable team. Tampa Bay's been amazing, we know this, but perhaps that gives us some value on San Diego going forward if they're finally getting some power throughout their bats.
Danny Burke's with us here. It's Burke's Best Bets on Hail Varsity Radio. And Danny, do you plan on tuning into the College World Series at all? I don't need to get a prediction, but the teams we got, LSU, Tennessee, Stanford, Florida, Virginia, Wake Forest, TCU, and Oral Roberts. It's a star-studded field in Omaha this year, and I want to get your take. Are you going to be watching? Are you going to make any plays?
So if it's on, I'll watch it. If I'm making plays, I think the only team I back is Virginia. And this is just strictly, again, like you said, I'm not really all into College World Series, but we've had some guys on the shows, and I have some friends who watch it. And the small amount of time I watch this Virginia team, they seem awesome to me. I know they get a really tough matchup against Florida, but someone was coming on our show saying it's going to be one of those two teams making it out of their region, whoever wins amongst each other. So I'm going to ride with the underdog in terms of the seeding, at least. I haven't looked at the odds, but I think they're also an underdog in their game coming up. But give me Virginia, man. We'll go with that squad rolling forward. So I guess you could hold me to that, Elijah.
Danny, last thought before we get you out here, the news of the day in Husker Nation. Oklahoma pitcher Jordy Bahl. She's the pride of Papillion La Vista. She is coming to the University of Nebraska, going to be pitching for the Huskers next season. And the question on a lot of Husker fans' minds, maybe the degenerates I should say, is what's the line for Nebraska to win the Women's College World Series next year? Do you know? Is that a line that I can go find in the sports books?
Oh, geez. I would say probably not, but I know some local bookies probably have those numbers set up around your neck of the woods, Elijah. So you may have to do a little bit of deeper digging, and you may be able to find that, and we'll have to let us all know.
Well, Danny, the thing is, if I go work for the local bookies, like I mean, that scares me. That scares me trying to get a number around here for Nebraska to win the Women's College World Series. I just don't know what kind of line I can get from the man on the corner.
Hey, just mention Schmitty's name, and they'll give you a discount. They won't cheat you on the odds, and you'll have some protection. I know he's got a good rep on those streets, so he'll have you protected, I'm sure.
We're going to slander Schmitty here while he's away. It's Danny Burke joining us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Danny, really appreciate your time here on a Thursday. Enjoy your time out at the friendly confines tonight, and I think I can say this with the type of season the Rockies are having. I'll say go Cubbies.
Hey, I appreciate you, my man. Thank you for having me on. And, yeah, hopefully we're flying the W tonight. Take care, guys.
Yep, Danny, have a nice night. There he is, Danny Burke joining us here, Burke's Best Bets on Hail Varsity Radio. We'll wrap up a Thursday edition of Hail Varsity Radio after the break as we get some thoughts from the Nuggets Championship Parade.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here on a Thursday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. It's Elijah Herbel taking you through here this hour as Connor Clark was with us for hour one. He's off doing some responsibilities for the Salt Dogs here this hour. So it's been, what do we want to call it? The Elijah and Friends Hour here on Hail Varsity Radio as Jeff Henrichs, longtime college baseball umpire, kind enough to join us to lead off hour one. Andrew Rogers from Coffee and Cream, you know him, you love him. He joined us at 5:25, and then we just heard from the pride of Chicago, Danny Burke. Danny getting us your best betting lines for the weekend as he was here to make you some money. Back in hour one, whenever Connor was with us, we had Brandon Vogel joining us for an extended sit-down as we talked to Jordy Bahl with Brandon Vogel, as well as if European soccer can be a model for college football moving forward. And let's not forget Brandon's thoughts on which college football mascot he would be most likely to serve at a dinner party and how he would serve that mascot. He went with Bevo down at Texas as he was going to do some barbecue for the dinner guests. If you have any thoughts on that, give me a tweet at Herbal Essences or at Varsity Radio is where you can get us your thoughts on which college football mascot you would be most likely to serve at a dinner party. And I'll get ahead of the jokes here. I know people are going to want to say the Iowa Hawkeyes. I don't want to eat a Hawkeye at a dinner party. Like, gross. Be better than that if you're going to send me any suggestions. But again, you can do that at Herbal Essences or at Varsity Radio. If you missed anything from the show today, check it out in podcast form wherever you get podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, or Amazon and Music. Leave a review, like, and subscribe. That's what pays the bills for us. So let us know what you think. Give us a review, good, bad, or ugly, and make sure you hit that subscribe button when you get the chance. I don't want to sound like that boring YouTuber out there that's always reminding you to subscribe to their channel, but I do want to remind you that is how we make the money. So if you like what you hear, if you want us to continue doing Hail Varsity Radio, give us a subscription. It's all you need to do and listen to Hail Varsity Radio. Before we get you out of here on a Thursday edition, I spent most of my morning watching the Nuggets Championship Parade, and as Schmitty has left the show to me for the next couple days, I get to play what I want, and I'm going to play some thoughts from the Nuggets Championship Parade as it was a party in Denver this morning. Head coach Michael Malone, he may have been the drunkest man at the celebration. He was pouring champagne on fans. He was taking fireball shooters on stage before and after giving speeches, and he had a sit-down with a local reporter before taking the stage, giving his thoughts and feelings on this day.
I got a crazy idea, man. I got a crazy idea. I'm kind of crazy. I'm a little bit emotional. Let's do this again. Yeah. Let's do this again. I want to be on another float. I want to come down the parade. I'm sorry for my language. Excuse me. and experience this again, because this city, these fans, this franchise, they deserve that.
Later in the festivities, Michael Malone was called the daddy of the Los Angeles Lakers, much to the enjoyment of the Nuggets faithful. So Michael Malone had himself a day at the Nuggets parade. As for Nikola Jokic, he said post-game he didn't want to come to this parade. He wanted to be back home with his horses in Serbia, as Jokic has become a star in the NBA over the past weeks and months. Here's what he had to say to the Nuggets fans that attended the parade today. An estimated 5 million people showing up, or excuse me, 1 million people, I should say, showing up to the Nuggets parade.
You know that I told that I don't want to stay on parade, but I want to stay on parade. This is the best. Yeah, this is amazing.
So Nikola Jokic had himself a fun time at the parade as well. Again, check us out in podcast form. It's going to be Elijah Herbel back in the driver's chair again tomorrow for your Friday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, 4 to 6. Check it out, and we'll be back with you Monday after that with a best of Hail Varsity Radio. Take care. We'll talk to you tomorrow.